So for the NCAA wrestling, I'm going to split this preview into two halves. So this week we're going to go over who I think has the best prospects of kind of getting into MMA at some point in their future, whether it's just kind of based on their skill set, based on their attitude, based on their background, who I think might actually have a future in MMA, whether they decide to or not. That'll be this week. Next week we'll get into the brackets more specifically and kind of talk about who I think is going to win at each weight class and why. So I'm just going to kind of do this weight class by weight class. It'll be relatively quick. Quick disclaimer, I don't, in a lot of these cases, I don't actually know whether these guys have any interest in MMA, whether they've trained in MMA in the past. What I'm looking at primarily is what sort of way do they wrestle? Do they kind of have an aggressive style? Do they like, in MMA, you like to see guys who can shoot a lot. A lot of the guys who make their living, make their success in the NCAA is just by kind of riding people out and being really good on top. They don't necessarily translate as well to MMA because a big part of MMA and wrestling is being able to defend your takedowns, but also being able to get your takedowns. Being able to shoot and have an explosive shot is huge for that. Having some upper body ability helps too, obviously, against the cage. You don't get to see that in the NCAAs because obviously there's no cage for them to kind of wrestle up against. But I'll be primarily looking at that and then also kind of looking at their attitude. Some of these guys are really good characters, and in MMA, your job as an MMA fighter isn't just as an athlete. Your job is also as an entertainer. If you're in sports, the sports business in itself is just a subset of the entertainment industry. So for these guys who are good entertainers, I feel like that'll help them out and give them a chance to succeed. So coming right off the jump at 125, and again at 125, you'd imagine that the guys who are wrestling at 125 in college would be able to transition to flyweight. Some of these guys, as they get older, they're going to have to move up in weight, so maybe these guys could end up being 35ers. If I'm looking at a guy at 125 who I think has a great chance at stardom, I'm looking at the guy who's number one in the country right now, and that's Thomas Gilman. Very good at getting to a shot, very aggressive wrestler. His game alone, I feel like, would transition well to MMA, but on top of that, he's probably got the best attitude in the NCAA wrestling, in all of NCAA wrestling right now, especially with Pat Downey being out of it. He's kind of known among NCAA wrestling circles as they're kind of being the Thomas Gilman and Villain Gilman. He kind of likes to play the heel role a lot. And for a weight class at 125 that really needs a star and really needs a guy who can kind of oppose Mighty Mouse, obviously he's not going to be at that level anytime soon. You look at a guy like Henry Cejudo, who's more well touted. Obviously, he fought Mighty Mouse after having trained for quite a while and wasn't able to get the job done. So I wouldn't expect Gilman to beat him anytime soon, but I'd expect him to be the kind of guy where if he trains for a while, he could become a star at flyweight. He could become a guy who, even if he never gets the title, he's still going to be a guy who's going to be fun to watch, and he's going to be a guy who's really fun to listen to. At 33, not as easy to pick a guy out. Obviously, the number one guy at that weight right now is Nathan Tomasello. If I'm just going to read off some of the top 10 guys. So there's Nathan Tomasello, Seth Gross, Cade Brock, Eric Montoya, Corey Clark, Zane Richards, Steven Miocic. None of these guys really kind of stick out to me as the kind of guys who would be MMA superstars. Obviously, Nato's got a great game, very aggressive, scores a lot of points. I guess I'd have to go with him just because of the fact that he's able to score and get to his shots really well. 41, same type of deal, not exactly anyone who really stands out. I think the guy who stands out most to me is number 5 from Rutgers, Anthony Ashnaut. Obviously, he's worked with Frankie Edgar in the past. They're around a similar weight at 141. He could probably make 145 if he's fighting in MMA, so right around that same weight class. I'm not sure what his interest in MMA is, but obviously if he does have interest, he's hanging around the right people to get into it. At 49, the guy who's number one and the guy who is last year's Hodge Trophy winner is Zane Rutherford. The guy just scores on everybody. Bonus point machine. I don't really know that he's wants to get into MMA. Obviously, he seems like the kind of guy where once he's done wrestling, he's going to want to keep on going further through wrestling, see how far he can get. He had a win over Logan Stever his freshman year, so he can definitely beat some of the top guys. Logan Stever obviously just won Worlds at for freestyle. So even if Zane goes down that route, I feel like if he really wants to get into MMA, he can be really great at it. But Anthony Colica from Oklahoma State's also another guy you could look at that weight class that has potential MMA if he so chooses. At 57, I'm going to kind of combine 57 and 65. So it kind of feels like right now, and there's some truth to it, that I'm just kind of picking the guys who are number one. Obviously, Anthony Ashnault is number 5. But between Nolf and Isaiah Martinez, I feel like there's a real reason to pick these two. Isaiah Martinez, for one, is the guy who's admitted in the past that he's interested in MMA. That's a route that he's really interested in going down. He's still following the Olympic wrestling route as well. He's probably going to try out for that, but you feel like if he doesn't make the team, he's probably going to transition to MMA rather quickly, and if he does, then after he's done, he may still go into MMA. And he's got a very explosive game. He scores a lot of bonus points. Same can be said for Nolf. Another thing with Nolf that makes him different than a lot of these guys is that he does a lot of moves in his wrestling match that seem kind of jiu-jitsu-like. I don't know what background he has in jiu-jitsu, but he does a lot of rolls, a lot of funk that he likes to use, and it seems like he's the kind of guy where you put him in a position where there's submission grappling, he's gonna fit really well into it. If it isn't something that he can do a great job of right now, it's something that he can definitely learn and pick up really easily. And one of the problems that I see with a lot of these wrestlers who get into MMA is they take people down, but then they just kind of sit in your guard and throw a bunch of arm punches and try to kill time. It's not the most fun to watch, but it's not really the most effective way to fight. Nolf seems like the kind of guy who's going to be able to pick up guard passing, who's going to be able to pick up a lot of different aspects of jiu-jitsu, use them offensively, and use them to get finishes against guys who are actually really good. Up at 174, right now the number one guy is Zahid Valencia, a freshman. I don't know that I see him as a guy who's going to get into MMA. Bo Jordan's also up there, but again, like I had said earlier, the guys who like to ride a lot aren't always the best guys to transition to MMA. If I had to pick a guy, I'd probably look at Kyle Crutchmer. He's ranked number 9 right now for Oklahoma State, but he's obviously a past All-American. Oklahoma State's got a great history of MMA fighters. And I feel like Crutchmer has kind of got that edge and that attitude to him where he's got a good wrestling base, he's got a good wrestling background. Obviously, he was an All-American. I feel like he's aggressive enough, he's got the attitude, he can become a star in his own right. At 184... the number one guy right now is Gabe Dean. He is probably going to win his 3rd title. He's gotten wins over guys like Ed Ruth and obviously other big names in order to get to his titles. Bo Nickel is doing really well at 184 right now. I would say Sammy Brooks is going to be the guy, though. I feel like he has huge potential to be a star. The guy right now obviously has got a mullet. He's a fun guy. The fans at Iowa love him. A lot of his takedowns, he's really good with his single leg, which single legs are defended pretty well at the top level of MMA, but I feel like he could still get to him. He can work his double as well. It's not his best takedown, but he's definitely good at it. His upper body takedowns are something where he's excellent, and I feel like for a lot of these guys in MMA, when they get guys up against the fence, if you've got the ability to hit a lot of good upper body takedowns, and for example, just in the Big Ten Championships, in the finals against Miles Martin, he was able to hit a trip on him where he had gotten him tied up with double underhooks and caught him with an outside trip. That's not something you really see all that often in the NCAA, so for him to be able to do that against a former NCAA champion, you'd imagine he'd be really effective up against the cage. He can beat down guys. He's got the look. He can definitely be a star. And then in the final 2 weight classes, both of these weight classes are headed by Olympic medalists from 2016 in Rio. So 197's got Jaden Cox, 285 or heavyweight has Kyle Snyder. Kyle Snyder was at the Stipe Miocic versus Alistair Overeem fight, and after that fight was over, tweeted out, "I want to fight at UFC," which I hope he wasn't saying I want to fight UFC. I think it was just he saying he wants to fight and then including the UFC in it. That's very interesting, obviously, for an Olympic gold medalist who wants to get into MMA. That's extremely exciting, especially at the heavyweight class where they're just, like I mentioned before, there aren't a whole lot of stars up and coming. And for him to come in, I feel like right off the bat, I mean, he could give a lot of the top 15 guys a really big problem if you give him about a year of striking, let alone if you give him a lot more time. Now, USA Wrestling is going to do everything they can to keep him in the wrestling realm. Obviously, he's got a great future ahead of him. He's probably got a few more gold medals left in him if he sticks with it. And they don't have great financial resources, but they can definitely offer him 6 figures plus to kind of live happy. They'll help him out and keep him in there. But if for whatever reason he gets bored with wrestling or he wins another gold medal and says, you know what, I feel like I've done a good enough job, I want to go into MMA, that's where the money's at. He seems like the kind of guy who could become a gigantic star at heavyweight. As far as 197 goes, though, again, it's tough to pick against Jaden Cox, obviously, because he's got his Olympic gold medalist, or he's got a bronze medal. The gold medal was Kyle Snyder. For Cox, there were some similarities that I see between him and John Jones, and that they're both really long. They're both guys where when people wrestle against them, they comment on how strong they are. I don't know what Cox would be like as a striker or where his creativity stands, but kind of being that long, lanky, really powerful wrestler. We've seen it with John Jones. It's worked very well. Even if Jaden Cox isn't half the striker that John Jones is, that's still a very effective fighter. And I feel like if that's something that he wanted to do, he could be great at it. Obviously, to get his spot on the Olympic team, he had to beat Kyle Dake, best 2 out of 3. It looks like Dake is going down a weight class, so the next time that he's looking to make the Olympic team, I'm not exactly sure who he'd be up against or how tough it would be for him to get the spot. But, man, you win a bronze medal as a collegian, and then obviously he's got a couple of championships as well. He's got a great pedigree. I don't know how interested he is in MMA, but if someone can convince him, and obviously there are some excellent wrestlers or excellent MMA fighters from Mizzou, most notably Tyron Woodley, also Ben Askren. They get in his ear. If they get him interested in MMA, he could become a star, and I could see him doing a lot of great things at 205.